A phone rings in a cold case investigation unit. The voice on the other end is calm, collected, and makes a claim that sends chills down every investigator's spine. I've killed 26 women, and I'm ready to tell you about every single one of them. The caller, William Nagara, a death row inmate who had remained silent about his crimes for years. This wasn't some desperate plea for attention or a last-ditch effort to delay execution. Nagara's call came with something investigators had never seen before: precise details about murders that had stumped law enforcement for decades. Details that only the killer could possibly know. When Detective Sarah Martinez first took Nagara's call, her immediate reaction was skepticism. Death row inmates make false confessions regularly, seeking attention, hoping to delay their executions, or simply manipulating the system. But something about Nagara's tone was different. He wasn't emotional or pleading. He was methodical, almost businesslike in his approach. "I can tell you where the bodies are buried," Nagara said with unsettling calmness. "I can tell you what they were wearing, what their last words were, and exactly how I killed each one of them." The specificity of his claims forced investigators to take notice. But what came next would transform everything they thought they knew about unsolved murders across multiple states. Nagara begins with Sarah Chen, a 23-year-old college student who disappeared from a parking garage in Portland, Oregon in 1998. Her case had gone cold within months when investigators ran out of leads and witnesses. For 25 years, her family lived with agonizing uncertainty about what happened to their daughter. Nagara's description of Sarah's murder contains details that were never released to the public. He describes her purple jacket, the textbook she was carrying about marine biology, and the small scar on her left hand from a childhood accident. Information that investigators confirm matches their case files exactly. "She tried to negotiate with me," Nagara recounts with chilling detachment. "She offered me her jewelry, her car keys, anything I wanted. She couldn't understand that what I wanted was something she couldn't give willingly." His words send investigators scrambling to verify every detail of his confession. When they contact Sarah's mother, Margaret Chen, she breaks down upon hearing that her daughter's case might finally have answers. For over 2 decades, Margaret has visited Sarah's empty grave, wondering if her daughter suffered, wondering if she called out for her mother in her final moments. But Nagara's confession about Sarah is just the beginning. As investigators dig deeper, they realize his knowledge extends far beyond a single victim. He describes crime scenes across multiple states, spanning decades of methodical killing. The question that haunts everyone involved is simple yet terrifying. If Nagara is telling the truth about Sarah Chen, what does that mean about the other 25 women he claims to have murdered? Modern forensic science provides the key to validating Nagara's shocking claims. DNA evidence collected from crime scenes decades ago, long stored in evidence rooms without matches, suddenly becomes crucial. Advanced genetic testing techniques that didn't exist during the original investigations now offer the possibility of definitive proof. The breakthrough comes when Nagara's DNA, already on file from his death row conviction, matches genetic material found on Michelle Rodriguez, a nurse who disappeared from her hospital parking lot in Denver in 2003. The match is undeniable. Nagara was there, and his confession details about Michelle's final hours align perfectly with the physical evidence. Dr. James Morton, the forensic specialist leading the DNA analysis, explains the significance. "We're not just talking about 1 or 2 matches. We're seeing consistent DNA evidence across multiple crime scenes that Nagara described with incredible accuracy. This level of correlation doesn't happen by chance. The DNA evidence validates more than just Nagara's presence at crime scenes. It confirms specific details about his methods, his victim selection, and the geographic pattern of his killings. Each positive match transforms another cold case into a solved murder, bringing closure to families who had waited decades for answers. But the DNA trail also reveals something more disturbing. Nagara's killings weren't random acts of violence. They followed a calculated pattern that suggests a serial killer operating with methodical precision across multiple states for over 20 years. As more DNA matches are confirmed, investigators face a sobering reality. William Nagara may be one of the most prolific serial killers in American history, and his confessions are opening a door to crimes that might never have been solved otherwise. Criminal profiler Dr. Amanda Foster studies hours of Nagara's recorded confessions, searching for insights into the psychology driving his decision to finally speak. What she discovers challenges everything experts thought they knew about serial killer behavior. Most serial killers who confess are seeking something: attention, notoriety, a sense of power over their final narrative. Dr. Foster explains, but Nagara is different. His confessions are almost clinical, like he's providing a medical case study rather than admitting to murder. Nagara's communication style reveals a calculated mind that views his victims as objects rather than people. He describes their deaths with the same emotional detachment he might use to discuss the weather. This psychological profile suggests a level of sociopathy that allowed him to kill repeatedly without remorse or emotional connection to his crimes. The recordings reveal Nagara's methodical approach to murder. He describes stalking patterns, victim selection criteria, and disposal methods with disturbing precision. Each confession follows the same structured format, as if he's reading from a carefully organized mental database of his crimes. But the most chilling aspect of Nagara's confessions isn't what he says, it's what he doesn't say. He never expresses regret, never acknowledges his victims as human beings, and never shows any emotional response to describing their final moments. His confessions read like technical manuals, rather than admissions of the most heinous crimes imaginable. Dr. Foster's analysis suggests that Nagara's decision to confess isn't driven by guilt or seeking forgiveness. Instead, he appears motivated by a desire to demonstrate his intelligence and the scope of his criminal accomplishments before his execution. As investigators map Nagara's confessions, a disturbing geographic pattern emerges across the American West. His victims span from Seattle to San Diego, following major interstate highways in a pattern that suggests careful planning and mobility that allowed him to evade detection for decades. Detective Martinez plots each confirmed murder on a map, revealing how Nagara moved systematically through different states, never staying in one area long enough to establish a recognizable pattern that would alert local law enforcement to a serial killer's presence. He was essentially invisible to us because we were all looking at individual cases within our own jurisdictions. Martinez explains, we never had the bigger picture that would have revealed we were dealing with the same killer operating across multiple states. Nagara's geographic strategy was sophisticated. He targeted victims in areas where he had no previous connection, used different methods to avoid creating consistent patterns, and carefully spaced his murders to avoid triggering multi-jurisdictional investigations that might have connected the crimes. The map of his movements reads like a roadmap of American tragedy, with each pin representing not just a crime scene, but a family destroyed, a life cut short, and a community left wondering how such evil could strike without warning. Analysis of his geographic pattern also reveals something investigators find deeply troubling. The systematic nature of Nagara's killings suggests there may be additional victims he hasn't confessed to, crimes that occurred in areas where his movement patterns indicate he had opportunity, but hasn't yet provided details. Nagara's confessions breathe new life into cold cases that had been virtually forgotten by everyone, except the families of the victims. Missing persons reports filed decades ago suddenly become murder investigations with a known perpetrator and detailed confession. The case of Linda Park, a 28-year-old teacher who disappeared from a shopping mall in Phoenix in 2005, exemplifies this tragic pattern. Her disappearance received minimal media attention, and the investigation stalled within months. Her parents never stopped searching, but law enforcement resources eventually moved to more recent cases. When Nagara confesses to Linda's murder, providing details about her final hours that align perfectly with witness statements from the mall, her parents finally learn the truth they've sought for 18 years. The revelation brings both relief and renewed anguish as they process the reality of their daughter's fate. Similar scenes play out across multiple states as Nagara's confessions solve cases that had been filed away and forgotten. Each revelation represents not just a solved crime, but the restoration of dignity to victims who had been reduced to entries in missing persons databases. The ripple effect extends beyond immediate families to entire communities that had lived with the uncertainty of unexplained disappearances. Nagara's confessions provide answers that allow healing to begin, even decades after the original tragedies occurred. But for every case Nagara solves, investigators wonder about the cases he hasn't mentioned. His methodical approach to killing suggests there may be additional victims whose families continue waiting for answers that may never come. As Nagara's execution date approaches, investigators race to extract every possible detail from his confessions. The man who spent decades taking lives is now providing the information needed to solve cases that might otherwise remain mysteries forever. The legal and ethical implications of Nagara's confessions create complex challenges. His cooperation has solved multiple murders and provided closure to dozens of families, but it hasn't changed his fate or earned him any legal benefits. He will still face execution for his original conviction, regardless of his assistance with cold cases. Margaret Chen, mother of victim Sarah Chen, attends Nagara's final court hearing. For the first time, she sees the man who murdered her daughter and listens as he provides additional details about Sarah's final moments. The encounter brings both the closure she sought and a confrontation with evil she never imagined possible. Dr. Foster's final psychological evaluation concludes that Nagara's confessions represent a final attempt to exert control over his narrative rather than any genuine remorse for his actions. His cooperation has been valuable to investigators, but shouldn't be interpreted as evidence of rehabilitation or regret. The families of Nagara's 26 confirmed victims finally have answers to questions that haunted them for decades. They know how their loved ones died, where their remains were found, and that the person responsible will face justice. But they also must process the reality that their family members encountered unimaginable evil in their final moments. As Nagara faces execution, his confessions leave behind a complex legacy. 26 cold cases solved, 26 families with closure, and 26 examples of lives cut short by methodical evil. His death will end one of the most prolific killing sprees in American history, but the pain he caused will echo through the families and communities he destroyed for generations to come. In the end, William Nagara's confessions represent both the darkest aspects of human nature and the possibility of justice, even decades delayed. His victims are finally remembered not just as statistics in missing persons files, but as individuals whose lives mattered and whose deaths demand accountability.